They thought slashing my pay was a show of strength. What they didn't realize was that they'd just yanked the pin on a 68 million grenade. When the smoke cleared, it wouldn't just take out HR, it would level the whole executive leadership. They were playing checkers. I'd been playing chess for 16 years. And no, my tenure didn't make me desperate, it made me dangerous. I'm Bradley Whitcomb, and the first warning sign came with a parking spot. That Tuesday at 7:45 a.m., I rolled into Polaris Digital Systems, the 3B Seattle Tech Titan, and found someone else's name on MySpace, Section A, Row 3, Spot 14, the spot I'd used for a decade. Efficiency realignment, chimed a voice behind me. Victoria Chambers, 29, and polished in a razor-sharp suit, stood there oozing MBA confidence and zero real-world scars. Our newly minted Chief Human Capital Officer, because HR Director apparently lacked enough jargon, offered a smile colder than an IRS audit. We're reallocating based on utilization metrics. Metrics for parking? I asked, slinging my laptop bag over my shoulder. Every square foot counts in our optimization strategy, she said, tapping her tablet like she was orchestrating Beethoven. Your new spot's in Section D. That meant gravel, dumpsters, and a not-so-subtle message. You're being phased out. Over the next week, her pattern became clear. She wasn't trimming fat, she was excising vital organs. James Fitzgerald, our lead security architect, badge access under review. Elizabeth Crane, who'd engineered our entire cloud stack, suddenly shut out of architecture meetings. Leonard Yang, the database wizard who saved us during the 2019 ransomware crisis, stripped of admin rights overnight. It was methodical. Target high-salary veterans, manufacture friction, document resistance, and build a termination file so airtight it'd make their own legal team nod in admiration. But Victoria made one fatal mistake. She assumed I was just another aging engineer clinging to relevance. She had no idea I'd weathered 2 hostile takeovers, an SEC probe, and a CEO hell-bent on offshoring our division to save pocket change. And she certainly didn't know I'd been quietly stockpiling insurance since before she'd even picked her undergrad major. That afternoon, I pulled up a folder labeled Contingencies, created back in 2007 during Polaris's cash-burning startup days when they needed someone who could scale infrastructure from 10K to 10 million users overnight. Inside, Section 7.3 of my employment agreement. I read it 3 times. Then I smiled, the first real one in weeks. Victoria thought she was playing corporate chess. She had no idea I'd been setting this board since day one. The first real shot came Thursday at 3:17 p.m. Antonio, my senior systems engineer, messaged, "Can't push security patches, needs special auth." My own access still worked, but when I tried to grant him permission, the system flashed. Requires HCCO approval. Of course, Human Capital Chief Officer. By Friday, the weekly exec briefing I'd run for 7 years vanished from my calendar, replaced by a strategic ops sync led by Connor Wells, a 9-month product manager who still confused load balancers with filing cabinets. His email chirped, "You're welcome to attend as an observer." Observer, in the meeting I'd built. I forwarded it to my personal inbox and filed it in my growing dossier. Monday brought escalation. Every budget request, server upgrades, vendor contracts now required Victoria's sign-off. Purchases I'd approved solo for years suddenly needed her blessing for fiscal governance. "Just tightening financial controls," she said sweetly when I confronted her. "Compliance is key." Translation: make my job impossible, then blame me for the delays. Then came her grand unveiling, a company-wide organizational transformation. In a conference room full of confused engineers, she drew boxes and arrows labeled synergy pods and agile decision matrices. Buried in the fluff, all technical decisions would now root through an innovation governance council staffed by her hand-picked MBAs. I stood up. So when production melts down at 2 a.m., who answers the pager? The council. Nervous laughter followed. She tried to shut me down with talk of AI-driven incident response. AI doesn't debug memory leaks, I shot back. It doesn't renegotiate cloud contracts mid-crisis. Her smile froze. Let's discuss this privately. Meaning, don't embarrass me in front of the troops. After the meeting, my keycard failed at the server room. System upgrade, security said, handing me a restricted badge. My root access was flagged for mandatory rotation. My code permissions, under routine review. Death by 1,000 paper cuts, ALD, dressed up as policy. She was good. In her files, I probably looked like a stubborn relic, but while she built her case against me, I was building something far more potent. I made a call. Robert, it's Bradley. Need you to look at something. Robert Lancaster, my lawyer through 3 exits, now living in a lake house funded by options I'd helped him cash in. Section 7.3? He asked, voice sharp. Bradley, they know about this. Doubt anyone's read a contract from before 2010. If they cut your pay after 15 years, it triggers full equity acceleration, automatically. That's the plan. How much are we talking? 68 million, give or take tomorrow's stock close. He whistled. And they're really doing it. I pictured Victoria's scalpel smile. Oh, Robert, they can't wait. Tuesday at 4:23 p.m., her email landed, sprinkled with emojis and corporate doublespeak. Hi, Bradley, let's touch base about your, compensation structure, I replied with 2 words. See you then. No fluff. Let her sweat the silence. That night, I backed up everything. Files, docs, institutional knowledge. Not to steal, but to remember exactly what they'd lose the moment I walked out the door. At 9:57 a.m. on Wednesday, I walked to Victoria's corner office. Through the glass wall, I watched her arrange papers with chilling precision. Beside her chair sat a thick manila folder, bulging with what I knew was a meticulously crafted termination file. I knocked once and stepped in. Bradley, please sit, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her, deliberately lower, of course. Water? Coffee? I'm fine. She shuffled her documents like a poker player setting up a bluff. Behind her, neatly arranged books, Radical Candor, High Output Management, looked more like stage props than reading material. I wanted to have an honest conversation about your role here, she began, voice smooth as polished steel. You've been valuable. 16 years. That's remarkable longevity in tech. She said it like longevity was a liability, not an asset. But as we evolve our model, we need to align compensation with market standards. Your current package, she slid a sheet toward me, is well above benchmarks for your role. I skimmed it. A 40% pay cut, demotion from director to senior manager, and a new reporting line to Connor Wells, the product guy who still couldn't tell a load balancer from a coat rack. This is your offer, I asked, keeping my voice flat. It's about right-sizing to reflect current value delivery. You'd still have a meaningful role, just with updated expectations. And if I say no? Her smile turned sharp. That would be, unfortunate. We'd need to reassess mutual fit. I leaned back. Victoria, we both know what this really is. Let's skip the script. For a split second, her corporate mask dropped, revealing the cold, impatient strategist beneath, annoyed I wasn't playing the victim she'd written for me. Fine, she snapped. The market's changed. Your comp is unsustainable. Take the restructure, or we part ways. I need to call my attorney. The word attorney hit her like a bucket of ice. Bradley, that's really not necessary. I was already dialing. Robert, it's happening. Send the letter we prepped. I held her gaze. They'll have it in 3 minutes. I hung up and pushed the unsigned proposal back across her desk. 16 years, Victoria. Maybe check what kind of deal employee number 12 negotiated when this company was 1 missed payroll from collapse. Her phone buzzed. Then her laptop chimed. Then her desk line lit up like a slot machine hitting jackpot. What did you... She snatched her phone, color draining from her face as she read the incoming message. Section 703, I said quietly. Any material pay cut? After 15 years of service triggers automatic acceleration of all unvested equity. That's about $68 million at today's market price, pre-tax, of course. She gaped like a fish gasping for air. Your move, I said, and walked out. Behind me, I heard her fumbling with the phone. Get me legal, now. The drive home took 14 minutes. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my phone was exploding. 23 missed calls, 57 texts, notifications flooding in like a denial of service attack. I silenced it all and poured a glass of the good scotch, the one I'd been saving for a milestone. If detonating a $68 million clause doesn't count, nothing does. On the kitchen island, my laptop glowed. I logged into my secure cloud drive and pulled up the file. Employment Agreement, Bradley Whitcomb, February 8, 2007. 19 pages of legalese no one at Polaris had glanced at in over a decade. Why would they? To them, I was just office furniture, part of the background. You. Don't inspect the foundation when you're busy redecorating the penthouse. But there it was, page 7, section 7.3. If base compensation is reduced by more than 15% after 15 years of continuous service, or if termination without cause occurs post 15 years, all unvested equity shall immediately vest at fair market value. This supersedes any later agreements or policies. I'd locked that in when Polaris was bleeding cash, desperate for someone who could scale their infrastructure from a startup to a powerhouse. The founding CFO signed it without hesitation, after all, who expected anyone to last 15 years at a shaky tech upstart. My phone rang. Robert, on speaker. Douglas Hammond and Rachel Fitzgerald from Polaris Legal are on the line. Bradley, Douglas's voice was tight. We need to talk about this situation. What's there to discuss? The contract's clear. It's 16 years old and still fully binding, Robert cut in, cheerfully. Unless Polaris doesn't honor its own agreements? Silence crackled through the line. We'd like to meet tomorrow, Rachel offered carefully, to explore options. My client doesn't need to negotiate, Robert said. The pay cut was offered. The clause triggers regardless of whether he accepts it. You made your move. We could withdraw the proposal, Douglas blurted. I spoke up. She's your chief human capital officer. Are you saying she didn't have the authority to make that offer? More silence. The board will need to be notified, Rachel finally said. This has material financial implications, SEC filings alone. Then notify them, Robert said. In the meantime, I'll send wiring instructions. Bradley's broker is standing by. He hung up before they could reply. Back on a private line, he chuckled. $68.2 million. Today's close. Though if this leaks before earnings, the stock's going to nosedive. Unplanned liquidation of that size? I said. The market will panic. They'll try to hush it up, so what do you want? I thought of 16 years of midnight outages, of building systems that now processed billions. I thought of James, Elizabeth, Leonard, all on Victoria's hit list. I want the full amount, I said, every cent, and I want it to sting. Robert laughed. Oh, we can definitely make that happen. My phone buzzed again, a text from a blocked number, a screenshot from inside Polaris. The exec Slack channel lit up with, emergency board meeting, 6 p.m., mandatory. Then another, Antonio. Never seen anything like this. Victoria's been in the bathroom for 30 minutes. Legal's taken over her office. I poured another finger of scotch and opened my laptop again. Time to review my backup insurance. I pulled up the emails where Victoria joked about trimming legacy overhead, the chat logs where she mocked dinosaurs waiting for the extinction event, the slide deck calculating exact savings from replacing senior engineers with offshore contractors, evidence of a pattern, not just poor judgment, malice wrapped in business jargon, and I hadn't even needed it yet. My phone rang. Blocked number. Mr. Whitcomb? An unfamiliar voice, male and nervous. This is Connor Wells. I've been asked to reach out and... Connor, I interrupted, the product manager who took over my executive meetings. How's that working out? A gulp. There's been a misunderstanding. We'd like you to come back to discuss transitional planning. Are you offering to restore my original compensation? Not exactly, but I hung up. They were panicking. Good. They should be. Because while Victoria had been playing her power games, she'd forgotten who actually understood Polaris's infrastructure, who knew which legacy systems still processed 60% of transactions, who knew which API integrations couldn't be migrated, without breaking major clients, who knew which dependencies would bring everything crashing down. Another call. This one from Andrew Shepard, VP of Engineering, one of the few executives I still respected. Christ, Bradley, he said without preamble. Did you really just bankrupt us? The company's worth $3 billion, Andrew. I think you'll survive. The board is going nuclear. There's talk of suing Victoria personally. Douglas might have a stroke. And the payment gateway is throwing errors we've never seen. I smiled. The payment system I'd architected in 2008, still running because nobody understood it well enough to replace. Sounds like an operations problem, I said. Have you tried rebooting it? Bradley, please, people's jobs are at stake. They were at stake when Victoria started her purge. Where was your concern then? Silence. The authentication certificates expire in 4 hours, I said finally. Rotation keys are in the documentation I left, assuming anyone bothered to read it. Thank you. Andrew's relief was palpable. Andrew, next time someone tries to optimize my team, speak up. I ended the call and turned off my phone. Let them realize what they'd thrown away for the promise of cheaper labor. $68 million was just the beginning. The real cost would be everything that broke once I was gone. Thursday morning at 9:30 a.m., Robert called with an update. They've been up all night, he said, barely containing his satisfaction. My contact at Sullivan and Cromwell says their entire partnership is camped in Polaris's boardroom, billing at emergency rates. How emergency? $2,000 per hour per partner. There are 5 of them. Their legal fees alone would hit 6 figures before lunch. Here's the beautiful part, Robert continued. Douglas sent the board a preliminary impact assessment. Your $68 million would trigger debt covenants on their credit facility. They'd have to restate earnings. They're in the middle of acquiring Helix Systems. $3.2 billion deal. It has a material adverse change clause. I sat down slowly. English, Robert. If they pay you, they might lose a $3 billion acquisition. I hadn't anticipated the domino effect. One properly leveraged contract clause threatening to topple an 18-month acquisition. There's more, Robert said. Victoria's been suspended. Turns out she never cleared your compensation reduction with the board or the comp committee. She exceeded her authority. Classic scapegoat move, sacrificed the executioner to save the king. But the termination letter had her signature on Polaris letterhead. The company was liable regardless. They want to meet, Robert said. 2 p.m. today, full C-suite plus board representation. Let me guess, they'll offer a consulting contract. Keep me around long enough to claim I'm still employed. That's one option. The other is they'll try to challenge the contract itself, claim it's unconscionable. With 16 years of glowing performance reviews, which is why they'll lose. But they have to try something. The alternative is writing a check that could crater the stock. I thought about it. The smart play would be to negotiate, maybe accept a structured payout over time. But then I remembered my parking spot behind the dumpsters. Victoria's smile as she handed me that pay cut proposal. Every brilliant engineer she'd targeted for elimination. Set the meeting, I said. Their offices. I want them on home turf when I say no. Bradley. Full amount, Robert, every penny, plus interest from the date they offered the pay cut. California Labor Code says wages are due immediately. Penalties accrue daily. He whistled. You've been doing your homework. 16 years of homework. Set the meeting. At 1:45 p.m., I dressed in jeans, a blazer, and my old Polaris hoodie from our Series B celebration, the one that said, Building Tomorrow in faded letters. Let them see what they were throwing away. Robert met me in the lobby at 1:55 p.m. They've made 4 settlement offers in the past 2 hours, he whispered, each worse than the last. Good. The elevator climbed 32 floors to the executive level. Through glass walls, I could see them gathered in the boardroom. Douglas pacing, Rachel shuffling papers, 4 board members I recognized, and CEO Nathan Cross, looking like he'd aged a decade overnight. They all turned when we entered. Bradley, Nathan stood, attempting warmth. Thank you for coming. Please sit. I took my time, noting Victoria's empty chair. Her nameplate was already gone. Before we begin, Rachel jumped in, we want to emphasize that yesterday's events resulted from a process breakdown. The compensation proposal wasn't properly authorized. I have the proposal, I said, pulling it from my bag. Polaris letterhead, signed by your Chief Human Capital Officer, seems authorized to me. Former CHCO, Douglas corrected quickly. She acted outside her scope. Is Polaris in the habit of hiring executives who don't understand their authority? Robert asked. That seems like a governance failure. Nathan raised his hand. Let's cut to the chase. We made a mistake. How do we move forward? Pay my client what he's owed, Robert said. $68.2 million plus interest. That's not happening, a board member interrupted. Theodore Walsh, investment banker from the Series C. Legally binding contract, Robert shot back. We're prepared to offer $12 million, Nathan said. Structured over 5 years, full NDA and non-compete. No, the word hung in the air. Bradley, Nathan leaned forward. Be reasonable. $68 million would be exactly what you promised to pay, I said, when you desperately needed someone to save your infrastructure, when you were burning VC money with no path to profitability, when I worked 100-hour weeks to keep your servers running. That was 16 years ago. And the contract hasn't expired. You had 16 years to renegotiate. Instead, you let Victoria play games until she triggered a clause she didn't know existed. We could litigate this for years, Rachel warned. You could, I agreed, while your stock price craters and the Helix deal dies, while your systems fail and your institutional knowledge walks out, while every senior engineer updates their resume. Silence. I'll make this simple, I said, standing. Full equity acceleration, immediate cash payout at today's closing price, plus accrued interest, plus a neutral reference confirming my exemplary 16-year tenure. Anything else? Nathan's voice was bitter. I locked eyes with each board member. Yeah, next time you let someone target your senior talent, remember this moment. Remember what institutional knowledge really costs. I walked out without waiting for a response. Friday morning brought the first system failures. Major outage on the payment gateway, Andrew texted at 6:47 a.m. The vendor tokens expired. Nobody knows how to regenerate them. I sipped my coffee and watched the sunrise. Those tokens were tied to a legacy account I'd managed personally. The documentation existed, buried in a Wiki Victoria's efficiency drive had archived. By 7:30 a.m., the tech press had picked up the story. Polaris Digital Systems suffers third day of critical outages. Then came the bombshell at 9:15 a.m. Breaking, internal audit reveals systematic issues at Polaris Digital. Someone had leaked the smoking gun. An internal audit showing HR had been misclassifying employees, denying benefits, and maintaining a spreadsheet titled Optimization Targets, listing every employee over 40 with more than 10 years tenure, including me. Robert called within minutes. This is a gift. Age discrimination, systematic targeting, documented evidence. We could triple the damages. I don't want to sue. I just want my $68 million. Which is why Douglas Hammond is about to call you directly. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, Seattle area code. Bradley, Douglas sounded exhausted. We need to talk. There's no off the record. I'm recording this. A pause. Fair enough. The audit leak? We know that wasn't you. Considering I've been locked out of all systems for a week, that's generous. We need help with those authentication certificates. Sounds like an operations problem. Bradley, please. People will lose their jobs. He wasn't wrong. The longer systems stayed broken, the more pressure for layoffs. Certificate rotation is documented in the operations wiki, I said. Search for authentication emergency procedures. Master password is in the secure vault under BW Critical Legacy. Thank you. Douglas, that's the last free advice. Next consulting call costs $15,000 an hour, 6-hour minimum. That's market rate for someone who can fix your disasters. Oh, and check the load balancer certificates. They expire tomorrow. I hung up. Within an hour, systems stabilized, but the damage was spreading. My Slack lit up with messages. Compliance found 3 years of missing audit logs. Major client threatening to terminate. Entire Europe team just resigned. Then came the message that changed everything. Bradley, urgent, check your email. Andrew. I opened my personal email to find a forwarded document, subject line, SEC whistleblower complaint. Someone had gone nuclear. A 20-page complaint detailing financial irregularities, hidden liabilities, and a pattern of terminating employees just before major equity vesting events. My case wasn't isolated. It was part of a strategy. The complaint included screenshots, board minutes, even recordings of Victoria bragging about optimizing human capital costs. My phone rang. Nathan Cross himself. I assume you've seen the complaint, he said. I have. We need to settle today, before markets close. I'm listening. 68.2 million, wire transfer. Within the hour, plus interest, plus healthcare continuation for 3 years. You sign a simple separation agreement, no admission of wrongdoing, no participation in investigations, no public statements. No NDA? Correct. We're not asking you to lie, just don't volunteer. I considered it. They were offering everything, plus healthcare. One condition, I said. The whistleblower complaint mentions systematic targeting. I want written commitment that Polaris will halt all age-based initiatives and review anyone terminated under similar circumstances in the past year. Silence, muffled arguing. We can commit to a full review, Nathan said finally. Independent third party. Not good enough. Halt and reinstate, or I become the SEC's star witness. More arguing in the background. Fine, Nathan said. Halt all current initiatives. Review all terminations. Reinstatement offers where warranted, in writing. Then we have a deal. Within an hour, $68 million hit my account. Within 2 hours, Polaris announced a comprehensive HR review. Within 3 hours, I got a text from Antonio. They're bringing people back. You did it. 6 months later, I stood outside Polaris headquarters. Scaffolding covered half the building, renovation for the 600 employees they'd rehired at premium salaries. Nathan had asked me to speak at an all-hands meeting, not as a consultant, as a guest, pro bono. Why would you do anything free for them? Robert had asked. It's not for them. It's for the people who survived. The auditorium was packed, faces from my old team, from departments I'd never worked with, but they all knew my story. Nathan introduced me simply, the man who reminded us that contracts matter and experience has value. Standing at the podium, I looked out at the crowd. They call me the Claws, I began, like I'm some corporate vigilante who brought down a corrupt system with one contract provision. But that's not the real story. I clicked to my first slide. A photo of the early Polaris team, 14 of us in a cramped office. The real story is that everyone who builds something meaningful leaves fingerprints on it. Code, processes, relationships, knowledge, these aren't line items on a spreadsheet, they're the foundation. I showed them the stock price. After cratering to $80, it had climbed back to $51. Polaris learned a $68 million lesson, but the real cost was much higher. Lost customers, failed systems, destroyed trust, all because someone decided experience was expensive rather than invaluable. I told them about the engineers who'd been discarded, about managers forced to fire good people, about Victoria, now working for a nonprofit helping older workers fight discrimination. Sometimes the best teachers are the ones who learned the hardest lessons. I looked at Nathan in the front row. Every termination is a confession of failure. Either you failed to hire right, train right, create an environment where people could succeed, or failed to value what they brought. Either way, it's your failure. The room was silent, then someone started clapping. Soon everyone was on their feet. As I left, Nathan caught my arm. The modernization project. The offer stands. Your terms. I'll think about it, I said. And I would. Not because I needed the work, my consulting practice was booming, but because maybe we could build something better. Outside, the Seattle evening was crisp and clear. My car waited in the visitor spot. But I didn't start the engine immediately. I thought about the message I'd received that morning from a software engineer in Boston. She'd been marked for termination after 14 years, but she'd heard my story, checked her contract, and found her own protective clause. You saved my career, she'd written. You showed me that experience isn't a liability, it's a weapon. The revolution was spreading. Older workers were standing up. Lawyers were adding protective clauses. Companies were thinking twice. Douglas Hammond was facing federal charges. 2 board members had pleaded guilty to securities fraud. The SEC had used Polaris as a blueprint for investigating age discrimination across the industry, and Victoria was helping others avoid her mistakes. I started the car and drove toward the sunset. 68 million richer, but worth so much more. Not because of the money, because I'd proven that in corporate chess, the pawns can become queens. You just have to survive long enough to reach the other side of the board. And sometimes, if you're very smart and very patient, you can plant a seed 16 years ago that blooms into justice exactly when you need it. They still call me the clause in tech circles, but I prefer to think of myself as a reminder. Contracts are written in ink, but karma is written in stone. Checkmate. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. Share your thoughts about corporate justice and standing up for what's right. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. And if you really want to help this story reach more people who need to hear it, hit the notification bell. Your support means everything. Until next time, remember, your experience has value, your knowledge matters, and sometimes the best move is the one you set up years ago.